What do you mean the keys don't work? I stood there, jiggling the doorknob like it would suddenly change its mind. My knuckles were white around my phone, my breath coming out in shallow bursts. Across the street, a man in a mesh tank top leaned against his porch railing, sipping a beer and watching me like I was a bad reality show. My name is Lana Serrano. I'm 21. I drove 5 hours home from San Diego for spring break, and I'm locked out of the house I grew up in. The house looked different, cold, lifeless. The curtains were gone. The flower beds my mom used to fuss over were dry, weeds curling at the edges like they were ashamed. But it was the for sale sign on the lawn that really punched me in the stomach. That was when I saw them. 3 black trash bags sitting by the front steps like abandoned pets. I walked up, hesitating before I peeled one open. Inside were my books, my sweaters, my debate team plaques, a smashed frame with our family photo, the kind of stuff you don't throw away unless you're trying to pretend someone never existed. I called my Uncle Mateo. His voice cracked like he'd just woken up, even though it was noon. "Your dad said you should have called first," he said, not sounding too sure of himself. They moved last week." "Moved where?" I asked, my voice tight. "Nobody told me anything." "They didn't?" He trailed off, and the silence answered me. I didn't even say goodbye before I hung up. Next, I called my dad. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hello? Dad, the house is empty," I said, the panic bubbling under my skin. "There's a for sale sign. My stuff is in garbage bags." A pause. And then, flatly, "We moved. You're an adult. Figure it out." Click. That was it. I stared at my phone for a full minute, like the screen might morph into some explanation. I called him back. Straight to voicemail. Called my mom. Voicemail. My 16-year-old sister Lila. Nothing. It was like I'd been deleted. No warning, no note. Not even a forwarded address. I sat on the porch until the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the place that used to be home. The old oak tree my dad planted when I was 9 still stood in the yard. I'd named it Oliver. We used to hang a swing from its thickest branch. Now it swayed alone, like it didn't belong here anymore either. I wasn't the perfect daughter, but I tried. I worked 2 jobs, maintained a 3, 8 GPA in political science, sent money home every month to help with bills. I thought that meant something. Apparently it didn't. I didn't cry. Not yet. Crying was for people who still had something to lose. I took the bags and loaded them into my car, still half expecting someone to yell from inside, "Lana? Wait, we're here!" No one did. I checked into a budget motel off Highway 99. The sheets smelled like bleach and cigarettes. I dumped the contents of the bags on the bed like an autopsy. Broken pieces of my childhood. A letter I wrote Mom for Mother's Day last year. My old retainer. A bent medal from placing 2nd in state speech finals. One bag had only 3 items. My baby blanket, a cracked mug that said "World's Best Daughter," and a post-it with the words "Didn't know if you'd want these." Didn't know if I'd want these? That was the night I made a decision. If they could erase me, I could return the favor. Growing up, family comes first was the gospel in our house. My parents had immigrated from Guatemala before I was born. They worked brutal jobs, Dad at a meatpacking plant. Mom is a night custodian and always reminded us how lucky we were. "We came here with nothing," Dad used to say. "So you could have everything." So I stayed in. Got good grades. Applied for scholarships. Said yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. While my sister got away with everything short of setting the kitchen on fire. Lila hated school. Flunked math. Was caught vaping in the bathroom twice last year. But somehow, she was always the one they protected. "She's still young," Mom would say. You have to understand. Maybe that's why this felt like betrayal twice over. Not just that they left, but that they left me. When I finally let the tears come, it was because I realized the truth. I'd been disposable. I called Dr. Kingsley, my advisor back at school. She picked up right away. "Lana?" she said. "What's wrong?" I told her everything. Well, the edited version. They moved without telling me. Left my stuff in trash bags. Dead silence. "Lana, listen," she said, voice firm. "You are not going to spend spring break in some dingy motel crying over people who don't deserve you. Pack your things and come stay here. I've got a spare room and plenty of wine. That's how I ended up in a book-filled craftsman home with 2 nosy golden retrievers and a fridge full of leftover lasagna. It wasn't home, but it didn't smell like betrayal. Dr. Kingsley, I was finally allowed to call her. Bev gave me space, didn't ask for explanations, just offered quiet support, hot tea, and the kind of hugs that didn't feel forced. Instead of binge watching Netflix or getting drunk with old friends, I threw myself into research. Bev had connected me with an internship at Marshall & Doyle, a small legal aid nonprofit that handled everything from wrongful evictions to discrimination cases. I was supposed to start in the summer, but Bev pulled strings. "Start now," she said. "Channel the anger." And boy, did I have anger. At first, I just filed paperwork and fetched lattes. But when one of the paralegals called out sick, I got asked to sit in on an intake meeting. The client was a single mom being forced out by a landlord who wanted to double rent. She looked tired, scared. But when she talked about her little boy and the only home he'd ever known, I nodded like I understood, because I did. When she left, our lead attorney, Nadine, turned to me. "You have a calmness about you," she said. "Clients open up. That's rare." I took that as the biggest compliment I'd had in months. The work was hard. Some days I stayed late filing notes. Other days, I walked out steaming, furious at what people had to go through just to stay housed. But it made something click inside me, something sturdy. For the first time since that porch moment, I wasn't drifting. I was building. One night, after a particularly draining meeting, Bev poured us both a glass of Cabernet and said, "You ever think about starting something of your own?" I blinked. "Like a business?" "Like a movement," she said. That's when the idea started forming. A legal advocacy project for students and young adults facing housing insecurity. I called it the Haven Project. I stayed up 3 nights sketching it out. Mission statements, budget projections, case scenarios. Bev reviewed it with a red pen. Nadine helped me add legal footing. I submitted the plan to the university's social entrepreneurship grant. Deadline, 48 hours before I found out something that changed everything. A voicemail from my mom. Her voice sounded fragile. "Lana, your father and we made mistakes. Please call." I didn't. Then came another message. My sister whispering, "Please, just talk to us." But I was done begging to be wanted. Or at least, I thought I was. Until a call came from an unfamiliar number with a San Jose area code. It was our old neighbor, Miss S. Chen. "I know it's not my place," she said, voice hesitant. "But your mom asked me to look out for anything strange at the old house." Someone broke in. My stomach tightened. They left something behind. "An envelope addressed to you. From a law firm." I felt the world slow around me. "What law firm?" I asked, grabbing a pen. And that was when everything began to unravel. I barely slept that night. My brain kept circling the same thought like a vulture. What could possibly be in that envelope? The next morning, I drove back to Bakersfield. I hadn't planned to return, but curiosity has a pull stronger than fear. When I pulled up to the house, I parked down the street. Just seeing that sign still stabbed me in the gut. "Miss S." Chen waved from her front yard like she'd been waiting. She handed me a manila envelope, her fingers lingering just a second longer than usual. "It was wedged under the front door," she said. "The cops didn't touch it. It had your name on it, not the current owners." The return address read, "Lozano and Partners, Mexico City." "Do you know them?" she asked. I shook my head, heart thudding. "No, but I think I'm about to." Back at Bev's, I opened it carefully like it might bite me. Inside were 2 pages, one legal, one financial, and a short note from the firm. "Dear Miss Lana Serrano, as the direct heir of Juana Herrera, you are entitled to proceeds from the sale of 2 properties located in Tulum, Quintana Roo, developed posthumously from land left in your name." My breath caught. My grandmother? She'd passed away when I was 13. I remembered her warm hands, the way she hummed while slicing mangoes. But she'd lived humbly. Her home was modest, her garden overgrown. Land? Condos? I flipped to the bank statement. The numbers nearly made me drop the paper. $428,560.75. I blinked. That couldn't be right. According to the paperwork, the development had been completed 2 years ago. The money had been sitting in a holding account under my name for months. awaiting my signature. There was one more detail. A legal notification had been sent to my parents a year earlier, since I had been 19 at the time and still a dependent. They knew. My hands trembled. They knew. And they left me anyway. I sat there on Bev's couch for what felt like hours, the envelope open like a wound in my lap. The betrayal deepened, not just emotional, but financial. They hadn't just abandoned me, they'd tried to cut me off from something that belonged to me. Bev came home around 5, kicked off her shoes, and saw the look on my face. "What happened?" she asked, sinking next to me. I handed her the letter. She read it silently, her face still. Then she leaned back and exhaled. "Oh, Lana." "They hid this," I said quietly. "They didn't just forget me. They tried to erase me. And take this too." Bev nodded slowly. "That's a whole new level of cruel." "I don't understand how they could do this," I whispered. "I was sending them money." "While they were keeping this from me, you do now," she said. "You just don't want to." She was right. I didn't want to believe it. But belief had nothing to do with the facts anymore. The next day, I called the law firm directly. The attorney, Mr. Armando Ruiz, spoke to me with polite professionalism. "Yes, Miss Serrano. The estate documents were sent to your listed guardians at the time your parents. When you turned 21, we reissued the file directly to you, but the previous letters weren't returned." "Did they ever respond?" "Your father emailed once," he said. "He inquired if the funds could be redirected to cover educational or family expenses. We told him that was not permitted under the will." Of course he did. My heart clenched. Not only had they tried to control it, they tried to take it. "Can I transfer the funds now?" "Yes," he said. "We just need your identification and a notarized signature." I hung up, eyes fixed on the far wall like it might split open with answers. But none came, just a quiet storm building behind my ribs. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed Bev's favorite wine glass, and poured myself a ginger ale. Something about that felt more honest. Alcohol might numb the pain, but it wouldn't help me think. This wasn't just abandonment. It was theft, premeditated and quiet. That weekend, the Haven Project got its first piece of good news. We'd been shortlisted for a $25,000 innovation grant seed money that could fund our entire launch phase. Bev popped open a cheap bottle of champagne she'd been saving for a win, and we danced barefoot in the living room like idiots. But even as I laughed, that envelope was still in the back of my mind. I hadn't told my parents I knew. I hadn't said a word to anyone except Bev. And still, the calls kept coming. More voicemails. More guilt trips. "Your mother's worried sick, Lana," my dad said in one. "We made a mistake, okay? Families fight. But we can fix it." I deleted it without listening to the rest. Then one day, my sister called. "Please answer," her text said. "It's important." I almost ignored it, but I didn't. When I picked up, her voice was quiet. "I didn't know, Lana." "About the money, I swear." "What do you mean?" I asked. "They didn't tell me anything. They just said you'd gone off the rails, that you didn't want us anymore." I snorted. "That's rich." "I found the papers by accident," she continued. "In Dad's closet, there were emails, letters in Spanish. I Googled the law firm. I said nothing. I think they planned to move and waited out until you asked about it," she added. "Mom said something about protecting you from making stupid choices." I almost laughed. "Protecting me? They were never going to tell me, were they?" "I don't think so," she whispered. That broke something open. Because Lila wasn't just my sister. She was the golden one, the one they kept. And even she had been kept in the dark. "I want to help you," she said softly. "I'm not like them." But I didn't know what help looked like anymore. On Monday, I walked into Marshall and Doyle with a fire in my chest. I met with Nadine after hours, showed her the documents, and asked her the question I had been afraid to voice. Is this something I could sue them for?" She read the letter twice, then leaned back. "Technically, they didn't steal the money," she said. "They didn't touch it. But they tried, and they definitely withheld a legal notice. That could fall under fraud by omission, especially if they lied about you being unreachable." I nodded slowly. "So it's not just immoral, it might be illegal." "Potentially," she said. "But legal battles with family are complicated, messy, and expensive. I'm not interested in revenge," I said. "I just want acknowledgement." Truth. She looked at me. Lana, sometimes the truth never comes from the people who owe it. Sometimes it comes from the people who witnessed it. Her words stuck with me. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to my parents, but to myself. I listed everything I'd lost: trust, a home, a sense of safety, and everything I'd gained: clarity, independence, a cause that mattered, and something more: a choice. I could spend the rest of my life trying to squeeze an apology out of people who couldn't spell the word, or I could let their silence be my answer and build something louder. So I chose. I filed the final papers for the inheritance transfer, signed the grant agreement for Haven, blocked the last of their numbers, not out of spite, out of survival, because sometimes the cleanest cut is the one you make yourself. I didn't celebrate the inheritance. There was no big shopping spree, no champagne toasts, just a quiet moment, sitting cross-legged on Bev's floor, watching the digits settle into my bank app like they didn't mean anything. A year ago, I'd have cried from relief. Now, all I felt was detached. Money didn't fix betrayal, it just meant I had options. That week, I spent hours planning the next move for the Haven project. I didn't want it to just survive. I wanted it to grow. We'd already helped a handful of students with basic legal resources, but the demand was growing faster than we could manage. I can finally afford an office, I told Nadine, somewhere near campus, maybe a couple blocks from the dorms. Think bigger, she replied, handing me a folder. Inside were grant programs, community partnerships, legal aid scholarships I hadn't even heard of. You're not just helping students anymore, Lana. You're building something real. I felt it too. The calls from my parents had finally stopped, or maybe I'd just blocked every avenue they had left. Either way, the silence was cleaner. Lila texted a few times, but I hadn't responded since her last message, "You deserved better. I'm sorry." I believed her, but believing didn't mean forgetting. By mid-March, I'd signed a lease on a small office in a converted historic house, 2 blocks off campus. Hardwood floors, chipped window panes, and the smell of old paper in the walls. It was perfect. Imperfect, but ours. I hired 2 law students from campus to help part-time. Dev was sharp with contracts, and Mel could talk to anyone and get them to open up. Bev helped design a simple website, and Nadine offered to mentor us through the tougher cases. We were on our way, slow, steady, and scrappy, but real. And then came the email that almost knocked the air out of me. Subject: Watkins Foundation Grant Application. Finalists presentation from Watkins Foundation Board Secretary. I stared at it, rereading the first few lines over and over. You have been selected as one of 5 finalists for the Watkins Social Equity Award. You are invited to present your initiative to our board next month. Final decision will be based on in-person presentation and Q&A. I sat there frozen, screen glowing in the dark. The Watkins grant was huge, 6 figures, enough to hire full-time staff, expand statewide, provide free legal counsel year-round, everything we'd dreamed of. Bev found me in the kitchen later, eating cereal from the box with shaking hands. "You look like someone just proposed or died," she said, grabbing a spoon. "Watkins," I whispered. "We're finalists." She blinked. "Lana, that's incredible. I'm terrified." "Good, that means it matters." The next few weeks passed in a blur of research, meetings, and mock presentations. I rehearsed in front of anyone who'd listen: Bev, Nadine, the interns, even one of Bev's dogs, who seemed mostly concerned about snacks. I spent hours refining my slides, cutting fluff, sharpening my message. "We don't just help students avoid eviction," I practiced aloud. "We protect futures. We give people a fighting chance before the system swallows them whole." Still, something felt unfinished. I wasn't scared of presenting. I was scared of being seen, really seen. Not the strong face I'd been wearing, but the version of me who still heard her dad's voice in her head, telling her to deal with it like I was an inconvenience. That girl still lived in me, curled up somewhere small and angry. 2 nights before the presentation, I finally replied to Lila's text. "Why didn't you warn me?" The typing bubble appeared, then vanished. Then came the message. I didn't know until it was too late. They lied to me too. I thought you cut us off. I was mad. I believed them. And now? I typed. Now I see it. All of it. What do you want from me? Just to be in your life, even if it's on your terms. I stared at those words for a long time. The day of the Watkins presentation came fast. I wore my navy blazer, the same one from my scholarship interview years ago. It didn't quite fit the same, but it felt like armor, like memories stitched into fabric. Nadine met me outside the glass tower where the foundation was housed. You ready? She asked, smoothing her own collar. Not even a little. Good. That means you'll be real. We rode the elevator in silence. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. The boardroom was intimidating 8 people around a long table, every one of them with sharp suits and sharper eyes. There was a judge, a philanthropist, a housing policy expert. I recognized 3 from news articles I'd bookmarked while preparing. When they called my name, I took a breath and stepped forward. My presentation began with stats, housing insecurity among students, legal gaps and protections, the way a single missed rent payment could derail an entire future. But then, I told my story. Not the version I gave in class, the real one. I came home one spring break to find my house empty, I said. My things were in trash bags. No warning, no forwarding address. I was 20, working 2 jobs, sending money home, and my family moved without telling me. I felt the shift in the room. They were listening now, not just hearing. I thought I'd been abandoned. But what I learned was, sometimes the people who break you also teach you how to rebuild yourself stronger, smarter, more compassionate. I ended with this: we don't need more policies. We need people who care. We need systems built on the belief that everyone deserves safe ground to stand on. That's what the Haven Project is. That's what I'm building. Silence. Then a board member asked, if this funding comes through, what's next? I smiled. I'll make sure no one else ends up sitting on a motel bed, wondering why they don't matter. They said they'd announce the winners in 2 weeks. I walked out of that boardroom lighter. Whatever happened, I told my truth. All of it. Outside, Nadine clapped me on the shoulder. You crushed it. I cried a little, I said. They needed to see that too. I was halfway through lunch with her at a nearby cafe when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Area code from San Jose. I stared at it for a moment. Lana? Nadine said. I picked up. Hi, this is Miss S. Chen, the voice said, rushed. Sorry to bother you, but someone was snooping around the old house again. Your name came up. My stomach flipped. What do you mean? I think you should come see. There's something strange. I drove back to Bakersfield with my chest tight and my hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing anchoring me to the moment. The stretch of freeway between cities had become something of a personal timeline where I started, where I was going, and everything I didn't want to remember in between. Miss S. Chen was waiting on her porch when I pulled up. Same floral apron, same kindness in her eyes. I know it's not my place, she said gently, but when I saw him out front, I knew it wasn't right. Him? Your father. I froze. He parked down the block like he didn't want to be noticed. Spent a long time just staring at the house. Then he walked up to the front door, like he was expecting someone. I stayed inside. I didn't want to interfere. But after he left, I checked. She handed me something wrapped in plastic. It was a torn envelope. My name written in rushed handwriting, smeared by water or sweat. Inside was a letter only a few lines. You probably won't believe this, and I don't blame you. But we didn't mean to leave things this way. We thought we were protecting you. Turns out we just lost you, Dad. There was no return address, no phone number, just those words and silence. I stared at them, letting them sit heavy in my palms. Not an apology, not really. Just an explanation that arrived too late, and maybe wasn't meant to change anything. He seemed smaller, Miss S., Chen said, watching me. Like he was looking for something he knew he'd already lost. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into my jacket pocket, and whispered, Me too. I didn't tell Bev right away. I didn't tell anyone. It wasn't guilt, or even loyalty, it was confusion. The kind that fogs everything, like standing too close to a fire and forgetting what the cold felt like. Back in San Diego, I threw myself into work. The Haven Project was growing faster than I could keep up with. We had new clients weekly, Word had spread, students were telling each other. Faculty were referring kids in trouble. We were becoming something real, but I hadn't told anyone about the Watkins presentation yet. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I was afraid to jinx it. Or maybe I was afraid I'd poured everything I had into something that still might not be enough. Then, 2 days later, I got the call. It was from the Watkins Foundation. Miss Serrano, the board was incredibly moved by your presentation, the woman said. We're pleased to inform you that the Haven Project has been selected to receive full funding. I didn't respond right away. My brain stalled, like it needed time to verify reality. You mean the full grant? Yes, she said with a smile in her voice. And an additional $50,000 in discretionary support. We believe in your mission. I thanked her. I hung up. Then I sat on the floor of my office, let the weight of it all press down, and let out a breath. I didn't know I'd been holding for a year. This was it. This was the moment. The next few days passed in a whirlwind. News spread across campus. A student newspaper did a feature. Local media picked it up. Formerly homeless student launches statewide housing justice program, read one headline. That one stung a little. I'd never called myself homeless, but maybe I was, at least for a moment. Bev organized a small celebration at her place, pizza, soda, nothing fancy, just the people who'd stood beside me when no one else did. You built this, she said, raising a glass, from a motel room and 3 garbage bags. I smiled, but inside, I kept thinking about the letter from my father. It had stirred something I wasn't ready to name, a strange pull in 2 directions toward closure and away from them entirely. Later that night, while cleaning up, I found Bev on the porch, wrapped in her old wool cardigan, nursing a lukewarm coffee. I never asked, she said quietly. What would you do if they really asked for forgiveness? I leaned against the railing, eyes on the dark horizon. I don't know, I said. I think I'd want to believe them, but belief doesn't rewind time. No, she said, but sometimes it explains it. The explanation came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks after the grant announcement, I received a letter at the Haven office. This one was typed, formal, from a law firm I didn't recognize. It read, Dear Miss Serrano, we represent your parents, Felipe and Alma Serrano. They are requesting a meeting to discuss unresolved matters relating to family property and past inheritance management. They wish to address any misunderstandings in person and offer documentation to support their actions. Should you agree, we will arrange a neutral location for the conversation. I read it twice. Then a third time. Documentation? I murmured. Nadine, reading over my shoulder, raised an eyebrow. This sounds less like an apology and more like a cleanup job. I thought they didn't touch the money. She nodded. Technically, they didn't. But maybe there's more you don't know. I don't know if I want to meet them, I said. You don't have to. I kind of do. She didn't ask why. She knew. We met in a conference room at a neutral legal office downtown. A third-party mediator was present, just in case. Nadine came with me. I wore gray slacks and a black blouse, simple, clean, unreadable. When my parents walked in, they looked like shadows of the people I remembered. My father had lost weight. His shoulders slumped, like even gravity had given up holding him tall. My mother's hair was thinner. She held her purse like it was a shield. Lila came too. She hovered near the back, quiet and unreadable. No one said anything for a few seconds. Then my mother stepped forward, placing a manila folder on the table. These are all the documents, she said. Emails, letters, the original notice about your grandmother's estate. You should have them. I didn't move. We never used the money, she added quickly. We couldn't. I looked at my dad. He met my eyes, then looked away. I thought I was doing the right thing, he muttered. You were doing well. We weren't. I wanted to fix things before you knew, but we couldn't catch up. So you left me? He winced. We were ashamed. Your success made us feel small. There it was, not an excuse, a truth. They were proud, but also jealous, intimidated, and afraid. I didn't cry. I just listened. You still had a choice, I said. And you chose to disappear. My mother nodded slowly. We know. And we're sorry. The mediator shifted, glancing at Nadine, then back at me. I don't need the documents, I said. I already know what happened. Then why are you here? Lila asked softly. I turned to her. Because part of me needed to look you all in the eye and know I could walk away and feel nothing. Silence stretched between us like an ocean. Then I stood. I forgive you, I said. But that doesn't mean I trust you. That doesn't mean I want you back in my life. My mother looked like she might speak, but my father put a hand on her arm. For once, he understood. I walked out, and this time I didn't look back. The thing about closure is, it doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up in silence. After that meeting with my parents, I expected to feel angry, or vindicated, or something loud. But the truth? I felt like I'd been walking with a weight I didn't even realize was there until it slipped off my shoulders without a sound. I didn't call Bev, didn't cry to Nadine. I just went home, made tea, and watched the steam rise until it disappeared. That was how I marked the moment. Quiet. Like the kind of peace that grows from wreckage, the weeks that followed moved fast. The Haven Project's funding came through in full. With the extra from the Watkins Foundation, we rented a new space downtown modern. Open floor plan, exposed brick, sun streaming through tall windows. It smelled like clean pages and new beginnings. We brought on a full-time caseworker and partnered with a local housing clinic. A rotating team of law students from across the city applied to volunteer. We didn't even have to recruit. The mission spoke for itself. Every day, I sat behind my desk, watching it all unfold. Students coming in scared, walking out with a plan. Families sitting in our conference room with tissues and courage. Housing forms scattered across tables. Conversations in every corner. Purpose had a sound, and it was loud. One Friday, a girl named Nika walked in. She was barely 18, freshman, first gen like me. She wore her fear like armor jaw clenched, eyes darting everywhere but at me. Her landlord had changed the locks while she was at class. No notice, no refund. Just a room rented sign taped to her door and her things in trash bags in the stairwell. I didn't ask her to explain further. I just slid a box of tissues across the table and said, "Yeah, I know what that's like." That night, I stayed late organizing case notes. The office was quiet. Soft hum of the AC. A single lamp casting shadows across the ceiling. Outside, the city murmured, distant and alive. I thought about how many nights I'd spent in a motel, wondering if anything I was building would last. Whether I was just holding my pain together with ambition and caffeine. Now, I wasn't holding anything together. I was creating from nothing, from pain, from trash bags. And every part of it belonged to me. Lila texted the following week. I saw the article. You look like Mom when she was younger, but stronger. I didn't respond right away. She followed with, just wanted you to know I'm proud of you, and I'm figuring my own stuff out too. For the first time, I believed her. It was strange how a person can be raised in the same house as you, speak the same language, eat the same food, and still feel like a stranger. And yet, I didn't hate her. She'd been a child when they made their decisions. I was barely more than that myself. So I replied, I hope you keep figuring it out. I mean that. She sent a single heart emoji. It felt enough. Later that month, we got a surprise call from a national nonprofit. They'd heard about Haven through the Watkins spotlight and wanted to feature us in their campaign, Real People, Real Change. The thought of cameras made my stomach knot. I wasn't doing this for attention, but Nadine said something that stayed with me. If people don't know what justice looks like, they don't believe it exists. So I agreed. The film crew arrived on a cloudy Tuesday. Simple gear, 2 people, soft questions. What made you start this? The interviewer asked, voice low. I paused, then said, someone once told me that home should be the one place you never have to earn. And I learned the hard way that's not always true. She nodded, just listening. I built this because I wanted people like me to have somewhere to go when the world says, figure it out. I wanted to be what I needed. That's all. They captured footage of our staff, the waiting room, the legal clinic, Dev explaining tenant rights to a single dad, Mel laughing with a kid coloring while his mom met with our caseworker. Real people, real change. When the segment aired, it went viral. Our inbox exploded. Donations poured in. A local law firm offered pro bono support, and for the first time, we had a wait list. I stood in the middle of that chaos, smiling. This was no longer a story about me. It was about all of us. One morning, I came into the office and found a letter on my desk. No stamp, hand-delivered. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a short note. "Congratulations, Lana. We saw the video. We were wrong. We're trying to be better. Just wanted you to know, Mom, I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry." I folded it once, slid it into the drawer with the other one from my dad. I didn't throw them away. Not out of sentiment, just because I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't hiding the hurt, but I wasn't feeding it either. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. That weekend, Bev and I drove out to the coast. Just us. No cases, no meetings, no emails. We stood barefoot in the sand, wind tangling our hair, water licking at our ankles. "I never thought I'd get here," I told her. "You didn't get here," she said. "You built here." I looked out over the waves, endless and steady. Sometimes I still think about that day. Coming home and finding the bags on the porch. "Of course you do," she said softly. "But you don't live there anymore." She was right. I didn't live there anymore. On the drive back, we passed through a small town where I saw a girl standing outside a community center, holding a sign. "Need help. Housing info. Anything helps." I pulled over, handed her one of Haven's new flyers. We'd printed 1,000 of them for outreach. She looked at it, confused. "What's this?" "It's a start," I said. She smiled. Not wide, but real. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was the hand someone else could grab. I used to think healing was this one big moment, a turning point, some dramatic end scene where the violins swell and the world rights itself. But it doesn't happen like that. Healing, I've learned, is the quiet choice you make over and over. Every morning, every night. It's the decision to live in the present when the past keeps trying to pull you back. It's saying not today until one day it finally listens. The Haven Project turned 1 year old on a rainy Tuesday. Dev brought in lemon cupcakes. Mel hung a banner she painted herself. It was crooked, but perfect. Bev stood near the doorway holding her coffee like always, beaming like this whole place had been her plan all along. We didn't throw a party, we didn't need to. Just being there felt like enough. I looked around the room and saw something I hadn't expected. Calm. The kind that settles deep in your bones. Not because life is easy now, but because you finally trust yourself to handle whatever comes next. A knock came at the door while I was reviewing intake forms. One of our interns answered, then turned to me. "It's your sister." I looked up. Lila stood in the doorway, hoodie soaked, curls clinging to her cheeks. She didn't try to smile, just held up a small box. "I didn't come to cause problems," she said. "Just wanted to give you this. You don't have to open it now." I nodded once, taking the box without a word. She turned to leave, then paused. "I moved out," she said quietly. "I'm staying with a friend, going back to school next semester. Thought maybe you'd want to know." I didn't say anything, but I watched her go. Later that night, I opened the box at my apartment. Inside was a collection of tiny things. My old keychain from high school, a Polaroid of me holding Lila when she was 4, a recipe card for my grandmother's arroz con leche in her handwriting, and at the very bottom, folded small like it was afraid to be seen, was a note, "You are always the strong one." I'm sorry I didn't say it before. I see it now. Lila, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't matter, but because it did. I sat with it, let it breathe beside me, and then I placed it in the drawer with the others, not out of habit, but out of grace. Some things don't need answers, just acknowledgement. Months passed. The Haven Project expanded. We got a second location closer to the border, where housing instability was highest. I started mentoring students who were going through what I had, not just legally, but emotionally. I never said, "I know how you feel," because I didn't. I knew how I felt, and that was enough. My voice, once a whisper in the courtroom of my own life, was now steady, measured. Used to amplify others, not just echo pain. I was invited to speak at a national housing conference. It was the biggest stage I'd ever stood on. I wore a dark green blazer, my grandmother's earrings, my confidence like armor that didn't need to be tested anymore. I told my story, briefly, then moved on to what mattered more: the families, the students, the ones who didn't get headlines but still deserved homes. Afterward, someone from the audience approached me. "Lana," she said, "you speak like someone who's carried fire and didn't let it burn you." I smiled. I didn't carry it alone. A few weeks later, I took a trip back to Tulum. One wanted to see the land, the place my grandmother left behind, the place that had once been meant for all of us, but ended up being my rebirth. The condo development was modern, gated, impersonal. Not what I remembered of her world, but the land just beyond, wild brush, scattered palms, the rhythm of ocean air, that was still hers, still real. I sat on a bench overlooking the water and thought about the money. How strange it felt to benefit from something she'd never seen completed. How angry I had been that my parents tried to keep it from me. But also, how grateful I was. Because that money didn't just launch a nonprofit, it lit the fuse in me. It reminded me what was worth protecting, and who I never wanted to become. Before I left, I gathered 3 stones from the sand. One for the past, one for the girl who kept going, and one for whatever came next. I don't talk to my parents anymore. Lila sends texts sometimes. I reply when it feels right. There's no reunion, no neat bow, just space, clean and calm. Like finally exhaling after a long swim. They haven't asked for money, haven't shown up at my door. I don't know if they've changed. I'm not waiting to find out. Some stories don't need second acts. They just need an ending that honors the truth. People sometimes ask if I ever think about going back to that house, that porch, that moment. I don't, because I already did the hardest thing. I turned the pain into purpose. I didn't throw it away. I planted it, watered it, watched it grow. Now, I walk through the office I built and see life blooming from the cracks. Students smiling as they get help, volunteers staying late because they care, families finding footing they never thought they'd feel again. And every time someone walks in scared and walks out stronger, I think, this is what I kept. Story 2, I'm going, Evelyn Scott said. With a wine glass held as though to make a toast, he stood at the head of our Thanksgiving table. My secretary is the object of my affection. A startled quiet fell over our dining room, and the turkey got cold. With his fork halfway to his lips, our son David froze. Our daughter Katie became enthralled with the cranberry sauce as she gazed at her dish. My sister Patricia's mouth practically fell open when her husband Robert appeared to be fascinated with his napkin. Her age is 22. Scott went on with unwarranted arrogance, as though being young were a feat. And, Evelyn, she is everything you are not. I put my silverware down gently, used my napkin to wipe the corner of my lips, and turned to face my husband of 25 years. Good timing, actually, I said, maintaining a calm tone of voice despite my pounding pulse. I'm Evelyn Hargrove, a 51-year-old senior accountant who has worked for 25 years at Westridge Financial in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've managed spreadsheets during the day and family obligations at night, establishing what I believed to be a safe life in the Heritage Hill neighborhood with Scott, our 2 kids, and our little but cozy house. All I wanted was to age with the guy I loved, to see our kids grow up and start their own lives, to finally retire, and maybe to take some trips. Scott's midlife crisis, which was reflected in his obsession with Jessica, the young secretary he had recruited for his insurance company 3 months prior, was now getting in the way of my progress. The public humiliation was just as unfair as the treachery. As if daring me to cause a stir, he purposefully chose to announce his leaving during our family Thanksgiving dinner in front of our kids and family. With generosity, Scott raised his wine glass to fresh beginnings and remarked, "We can talk about the specifics later." His toast was not accompanied by anyone. With tears running down her cheeks, Katie got up and hurried out of the room. David gave his father a disgusted and incredulous look. "You ought to go, in my opinion." Silently, I said. Scott said, "It's still my house, too," with a tone of smugness that suggested he had already figured out his edge. "Tomorrow, I'll pack some stuff." Scott withdrew to his study with the remnants of the wine bottle, while our visitors clumsily excused themselves. With the ruins of my marriage scattered all over the dining room, I started to methodically clean the dishes, my mind strangely at ease. I saw our answering machines flashing light when I was loading the dishwasher. I hit play and heard Evelyn, my Uncle Edward's lawyer, who I knew well. James Benedict is beckoning. "I have important news about your uncle's property. Give me a call as soon as you can, Uncle Edward." 3 weeks prior, my mother's brother, a longtime bachelor who had amassed a fortune in commercial real estate, had died. Although I had always been his favorite niece, I didn't expect anything from his will other than maybe a memento or modest memento. I had no idea that an even more spectacular entrance would soon eclipse Scott's spectacular departure. When we were seniors at Michigan State, Scott and I got to know one another. He had a fast smile that appeared to be directed at me all the time, and he was pleasant and ambitious. I had previously planned my accounting career and was diligent and well-organized. We counterbalanced one another. My reality grounded his ambitions, while his spontaneity softened my rigidity. That's what we told ourselves anyhow. After I had made a name for myself at a nearby accounting firm, and Scott had started his insurance company with a small business loan, we were married early, at the age of 26. Lean but content were the early years. Our Heritage Hill Victorian, a fixer-upper that took up our weekends for over 10 years, required a down payment, which we carefully saved for. With each kid returning to work and balancing the responsibilities of both parenting and a profession, I only took 6 weeks of maternity leave. Scott's goals expanded along with his business. The little office grew into a prominent downtown space. Custom tailoring eventually replaced department shop outfits in his wardrobe. He joined the country club to make contacts that may lead to high net worth clientele, not because he played golf seldom. I backed these initiatives because I thought they were investments in our future together. My career developed in a steady, albeit unimpressive, manner early. I rose to the position of senior accountant at Westridge Financial after earning a reputation for my careful work and moral principles. Throughout the expected declines in Scott's commission-based income, my salary offered steady support. Throughout my life, Uncle Edward had always admired my pragmatic outlook. At our monthly meals, he would add, "You're the aunt to all those grasshoppers. Always be ready," always anticipating the future. I had been going to see him every week since he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 6 months prior, bringing home cooked meals that he hardly ever ate and companionship that he appeared to cherish more than I had thought. In retrospect, I can see the red flags in my marriage. Scott's growing disapproval of my routines and sensible attire. At 49, he suddenly became interested in fitness, and he bought the new convertible without talking. The late-night workplace parties that smelt of strange scent. I acknowledged the typical symptoms of a midlife crisis, but I brushed them off, assuring myself that our foundation was too strong to fall apart over such cliches. When I expressed my worries, my sister Patricia reassured me that men went through stages. At 50, Edward experienced something similar. "Do you recall the motorcycle?" I thus bided my time till the phase ended. Even when Scott brought up employing Jessica, I felt that my tolerance and understanding had been earned throughout the course of our 25-year marriage. I repressed my discomfort and described her as intelligent and perceptive despite her inexperience. After all, she was younger than our daughter. Scott wouldn't be so predictable, surely. I had surprised him by dropping by his workplace 2 weeks prior and bringing lunch. I should have expected to find his door closed, quiet, and chuckling coming from within after the receptionist's pathetic look. There must be a plausible explanation, I told myself as I drove back to work after leaving the sandwiches with the receptionist. I opted for trust instead of skepticism, loyalty rather than proof. I questioned whether I had been faithful to a man who had never really existed as I watched Scott refill his wine glass in a lonesome celebration of ruining our family. As is customary in Michigan November, the morning following Thanksgiving broke with a crystalline clarity. Unwilling to share the bedroom with Scott, I had slept restlessly on the sofa in the living room. Long after midnight, he had staggered upstairs, leaving the empty wine bottle in his study. I prepared coffee and left a message with James Benedict's secretary at his office. Scott was already up and packing when I went upstairs to get new clothing. Still wearing yesterday's clothes, he said without asking. Jessica's apartment is too small for both of us. Packing clothes into a travel bag. Until we find something acceptable, I will remain at the Parkview Hotel. We? It hurt more than I anticipated that the plural was used so casually. When did it begin? My voice was unusually calm as I asked. Perhaps surprised by my straightforward inquiry, Scott hesitated. Is it important? Sitting heavily on the bed we'd shared for decades? He moaned. At least we should be honest about the end of our 25-year marriage. July. She was attentive and engaged during the workplace picnic. He became defensive in his expression. You have no idea how long you haven't truly cared about anything about me. Evelyn? Jessica pays attention. She is enthusiastic about my ambitions and ideas. Her age is 22. I gave a bland response. Everything is thrilling, 22 years old. Scott argued that it's more than age. She sees the true me, the person that was hidden under life insurance policies, student loans, and mortgages. I looked at my husband's thinning hair, which he had just begun to tint, and the pricey watch that had taken the place of the one I had bought him for our 10th anniversary. His middle-aged paunch was somewhat stretched by the fashionable clothing. For the adulation of someone who was only older than our children, this man was willing to discard a quarter-century of our common history. The fact that you didn't respect me enough to terminate things discreetly is perhaps what bothers me the most, I replied cautiously. Scott was gracious enough to appear briefly embarrassed. Then his face became stern. I required witnesses. Your family must realize that this is more than a passing relationship or midlife crisis that they can help you deal with. This is true. It became immediately apparent that his public declaration was a deliberate act of cruelty. He had intended to degrade me, to prevent us from getting back together, and to place all the burden for the breakdown of our marriage on him. I would not fight for it, therefore, I understand. The doorbell interrupted my simple statement. What more could Scott have said? A courier with a certified letter that needed my signature was waiting for me when I came downstairs. James Benedict's legal practice was the return address. In the kitchen, I opened it and skimmed the formal legal language until the important phrases jumped out. Sole recipient, regulating interest. A figure that made me grip the kitchen counter for support, and a thorough portfolio. $4.7 million. Despite his wealth, Uncle Edward had led a modest life and had left me his whole estate. His charitable foundation, his investments, and his commercial properties. The inheritance was set up as distinct property that was created after my marriage and specifically stated to belong to me alone, not the marital estate. Uncle Edward's handwritten note was enclosed with the letter. I've always respected your strength and loyalty, Evelyn. Both are put to the test in life. Think of this as your safety net. Whatever happens next, he had suspected or at least known that I might require independent funding. Had my own worries crept into our conversations more than I realized? Or had he noticed something in Scott that I had overlooked? I heard Scott talking on the phone upstairs. He spoke animatedly as he told someone about his freedom. Jessica, most likely. Something else was replacing my numbness. It was a clarifying sense of possibility, not quite relief or anger. After carefully folding the letter and putting it in my purse, I started mentally listing the things that needed to be done right away. I didn't think my life at 51 would turn out this way. However, as Uncle Edward's parting present proved, unexpected events can occasionally offer a unique form of liberation. I called James Benedict to confirm the specifics of my inheritance after waiting for Scott to depart with his bags. The lawyer recommended that we get together right away to talk about our options, which included assuming control of Uncle Edward's business ventures. Your uncle was very clear about what he wanted, James said. He wanted you to be totally independent in your personal and professional choices. I called Patricia to make an appointment for Monday morning, and she showed up half an hour later with a bottle of wine and a lot of protective energy. That absolute bastard, she fumed, pacing my kitchen. After everything you've done for him, the sacrifices, the support, it's over, I interrupted, pouring us each a glass. What matters now is moving forward with dignity. Patricia paused, mid-stride. You seem surprisingly calm. I slid Uncle Edward's letter across the counter. Patricia's eyes widened as she read her expression, transforming from outrage to astonishment. "Holy shit! Evelyn, you're rich!" "It appears so," I acknowledged. The reality still sinking in. The question is what to do about it and about Scott. Patricia's grin turned predatory. "Oh, this is too perfect, Mr. Midlife crisis thinks he's trading up for a younger model, not realizing his reliable old wife just hit the jackpot. He doesn't know yet," I clarified, "and I'm not sure how or when to tell him." "You don't owe him anything," Patricia insisted. "He humiliated you in front of your entire family. Let him find out when it's too late." Part of me agreed with her vindictive impulse. But 25 years of marriage deserved more consideration than an impulsive reaction. I needed time to process both Scott's betrayal and my sudden wealth over the weekend. I maintained an outward calm while internally vacillating between grief and calculation. The children came and went, offering support and expressing their own anger toward their father. Katie refused to speak to him when he called. David agreed to meet for coffee, but returned, seething with indignation. "He tried to justify it, Mom," David reported said he deserved happiness after sacrificing his prime years for the family. As if you didn't sacrifice just as much. By Monday morning, I had composed myself enough to meet James Benedict at his downtown office. The attorney, a contemporary of Uncle Edward's, with silver hair and perceptive eyes, greeted me warmly. "Your uncle spoke of you often," he said as we settled into his wood-paneled conference room. "He admired your steady character tremendously." For 2 hours, James outlined the extent of my inheritance: 6 commercial properties in Grand Rapids and surrounding areas, a diverse investment portfolio, a controlling interest in a property management company, and stewardship of a charitable foundation supporting educational initiatives. "Edward believes strongly in financial independence," James explained, sliding a folder across the table, "particularly for women. His mother, your grandmother, was left destitute after his father's death. He never forgot that vulnerability. The inheritance was specifically structured to remain separate from marital assets, a legal distinction that would become crucial in the coming weeks." As I left James's office with a stack of documents to review, my phone chimed with a text from Scott. "I need to discuss finances. Dinner tonight." I agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet Italian restaurant downtown where we'd once celebrated anniversaries in happier times. Scott arrived, looking simultaneously smug and uneasy, kissing my cheek as if our marriage weren't lying in ruins between us. "You're looking well," he opened, studying me with slight confusion. Perhaps he'd expected red eyes and disheveled appearance, visible evidence of my devastation. "What did you wish to discuss?" I asked, ignoring small chat. Scott cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about the house. It makes sense for you to stay there, of course. But given its importance, we should debate pay. Compensation? My part of the stock," he clarified. "I'm thinking we could negotiate a buyout over time. I realize you don't have liquid funds to acquire my half entirely." The assumption was stunning. Not only was he leaving me for a woman half my age, but he expected me to make payments to him while he constructed his new life. "I need time to think about it," I answered thoughtfully. Scott nodded magnanimously. "Of course, there's a lot to take in, but in order to start over, Jessica and I will require funding. You understand, I'm sure." With absolute clarity, I saw that Scott viewed me as merely a money asset to be used up and then abandoned. A first step toward his new life with Jessica. "My lawyer will get in touch with you." I did it, struggling to keep my cool. Scott's brows went up. "You already have a lawyer?" That feels like an unnecessary confrontation. "Evelyn, I believed that this could be resolved peacefully, friendly." At Thanksgiving dinner, I repeated the phrase tasting bitter, which embarrassed me. Friendly. Scott was graceful enough to appear briefly uneasy. I acknowledged that the timing could have been inconsiderate, but I had to make amends for Jessica's sake. "You mean?" He looked at his timepiece. I was aware of this anxious tendency from our many financial talks during our marriage. Jessica deserves a new beginning free from the baggage of my past. She has her entire life ahead of her because she is still young, and I guess I'm not. The words came out sharper than they should have. I did not intend that. He tried to grab my hand by reaching across the table. I smoothly withdrew it. Evelyn, you'll be all right. You've always had tenacity. Adaptable? Between us, the word hovered. Throughout our marriage, he subtly acknowledged how many times I had bent without breaking. Financial hardships throughout the early stages of his business, years of juggling full-time employment and childcare, the emotional toll of sustaining our house and relationships, and the constant need to adjust and make accommodations. Yes, I did agree with you. At last. I'm tough. He must have been alarmed by something in my voice. His face changed from condescending assurance to caution. We ought to talk about the pragmatic issues. He turned around. Asset distribution. Supporting factors. I interrupted. I've been looking at our financials. I would want to fix a few anomalies. Scott blinked quickly. Unusualities? Withdrawals from the savings we have together. About $47,000 for the previous 6 months? He blushed. Business-related costs. Short-term cash flow problems. I intended to swap it out. With what? For the past 3 years, your agency's earnings have been dropping. His eyes flashed with anxiety, confirming my suspicion. Our money had been steadily being sucked out by Scott, perhaps to support his new life with Jessica. Perhaps hotel rooms and expensive dinners, presents, the foundation of his affair. How would you find out how much money the agency makes? He made a defensive demand. Right now, Scott, I work as an accountant. I saw trends. After a speedy recovery, he smoothed his features into what I knew to be his client, smiling while facing. We must approach our breakup rationally for just this reason. Both of us are under stress and accusing one another. If it can be proven to be true, it is not an allegation. I responded, bringing up our bank statement on my phone as I pushed it over the table. The withdrawals fit in well with your weekend client meetings and late evenings at work. After focusing on the evidence, Scott looked at me icily. All right, I've been preparing to go. Do you think I'm to blame? 25 years of the same dull, predictable routine with the same dull, predictable wife? In order to make sure I would withdraw into pain rather than pursue the money disparities, the brutality was purposefully done to cause pain. A week ago, it may have worked. Calmly, I asked for the money back. Everything, he gave a contemptuous laugh. That isn't taking place. Think of it as the cost of your liberty, Scott. You're not selling freedom. It's treachery disguised as freedom. His face grew stern. You've been critical all along. Jessica embraces me for who I am. Jessica will identify you even though she doesn't yet. His features twitched with real anxiety, as if something in my speech registered. What does that signify? Scott's phone rang with an incoming call before I could answer. The screen flashed Jessica's name. Accept it, I urged. She's probably excited to learn about your plans for a cordial divorce. He took a moment to think before responding, moving away from the table for privacy. I observed his animated gestures. He must have reassured his young lover that everything was going according to plan, but his back was to me. I signaled for the check using this moment. I went over what I had learned from my meeting with James Benedict that morning in my mind while I waited. Information I hadn't told Scott yet. It was more than just the impending inheritance. What Uncle Edward's private investigator had discovered was far more detrimental to Scott's meticulously crafted story. Without my knowledge or approval, Scott had obtained a sizable business loan 2 years prior using our home as collateral. I committed fraud by forging my signature on the documents. At this point, the debt was in default. Scott said that he wasn't only abandoning me for a younger lady, but that he was in a hurry to talk about money. He was trying to escape a financial catastrophe that he had caused. 2 weeks after our encounter at the restaurant, I carried out a methodical plan on 3 fronts. In order to record Scott's financial misconduct, I first met with a forensic accountant who was suggested by James Benedict. Second, I sought advice from a divorce lawyer who focuses in fraud cases. Third, Uncle Edward's economic interests were taken over by me. I'm delving deeply into the specifics of managing commercial properties. Scott persisted in his effort to take money out of our marriage throughout this time. His writings were a mix of sentimentality. Do you recall our Mackinac Island trip? There was something unique about us. And threats with thin veils. According to Jessica, I ought to have your accounting practice evaluated forensically. I didn't say much. In order to buy time while the evidence gathered, The forensic accountant found that Scott had created credit cards in my name and accrued significant debt in addition to defaulting on the false company loan. His persistent falsification of his agency's financial records to hide dwindling revenues, possibly insurance fraud, is much more incriminating. Maureen Winters, my divorce lawyer, was direct in her evaluation. We have enough for more than divorce procedures, including criminal accusations. I want to know what you desire. My desires were complex. Fairness, of course. Safeguarding my resources, of course. But retaliation, the feeling was alien and ineffective. I want a just conclusion that takes into account the facts of our case, I told her, and I want it over with as soon as possible. Maureen gave a nod of approval. In order to safeguard your assets, we will file right away and ask for interim orders. With your financial stability guaranteed, the inheritance makes things easier. We can concentrate on unraveling the scam. Everything was going according to plan until Scott unexpectedly brought Jessica to our home to gather some personal belongings from my home. They were in our bedroom when I got home after a meeting with Uncle Edward's property manager. As Scott packed watches and cufflinks, Jessica sat on our bed and browsed through her phone. She said, "You must be Evelyn," without raising her gaze. "I've learned so much about you from Scott." I researched the young lady who had helped to ruin my marriage. Pretty in the typical sense. Blonde and slender, with the assurance of one who has not yet experienced serious letdown. She wore pricey clothing that was still shiny from a recent purchase. "Scott is talking and walking for $47,000. Has he informed you about the inquiry into fraud?" I inquired in a friendly manner. Jessica jerked her head up. "What?" With a thundering face, Scott came out of the closet. "Evelyn? That's sufficient. The debt that was in default. The credit card debt, the fake signatures." Scott assured Jessica that she was lying, but his voice was tinged with doubt. "Am I?" I took a folder out of my backpack and held it out to Jessica. Copies of the pertinent documents are included below. Perhaps you should think twice before tying your wagon to a sinking ship. Scott raced for the folder, but Jessica was faster, snatching it up and frantically going over the contents. "What is this?" She held up a credit card bill and requested. "After the divorce, you promised to take me to Paris." Scott started to explain, but Jessica was already on her way to the door folder. She was holding tightly to her chest. "You claimed to be financially stable." She made the accusation. "You said that Evelyn was the issue." Scott turned on me with icy rage when she departed. "Everything is damaged by you. You handle that all by yourself," I answered. Maureen called the next morning with some shocking news. Scott had called another lawyer and asked for an urgent settlement conference. She clarified that he is in a hurry to reach a settlement and offered to confess to the illegal loan in return for avoiding the involvement of law enforcement. With Scott's relationship failing and legal trouble approaching, it appeared that Jessica's departure had dashed his hopes of a fresh start free from consequences. At last, he was confronting reality. I should have been elated. Rather, I felt strangely empty. After 25 years of marriage, it ended in a frantic attempt to escape criminal charges rather than with respect. "What would you suggest?" Maureen was asked. "We're in a good place. We could demand anything. Your whole retirement savings, the house, and even compensation for the deception." The decision came together with unexpected clarity. "Set up the meeting, however, I have certain terms in mind. Like, I desire a fresh start, total disassociation. No more communication." Maureen seemed taken aback. No sanctions, no compensation. In my bedroom, I imagined Scott and Jessica, their careless incursion into the area where I had lived for 25 years. How swiftly everything had been thrown away and devalued. An escrow account is used to hold the fraud documentation. I made the decision that the divorce would stay final if he complied with its conditions. If not, there will be repercussions. Maureen's voice was full of approval. That's right. The next week was set aside for the settlement meeting. I had a property empire to learn in the meanwhile. Maureen's modern downtown office with a view of the Grand River served as the venue for the settlement discussion. Scott came by himself. His usually flawless look was tattered. His shirt was crumpled. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his pricey watch was noticeably missing from his wrist. Conciliatory rhetoric about making errors together and moving on peacefully was used by his lawyer, a jittery man with a permanent scowl. He was mid-platitude when Maureen's cold smile interrupted him. She tossed paperwork over the table and remarked, "Let's be clear about the situation. Deception, theft of identity, financial fraud. It's not a mutual error." While his lawyer went over the facts, Scott avoided my eyes and kept his eyes fixed on the table. "My customer is willing to make substantial compromises," the lawyer started. Maureen said, "That's lucky because my client is ready to bring criminal charges." Like a sword, the menace lingered in the air. At last, Scott raised his head. A mixture of dread and contempt met my gaze. "Evelyn, what do you want?" His voice was husky as he inquired. I opened my brought folder. Photographs of our lives together, not court records. The day we got married, the birth of the kids, and the house before it was renovated. The development of a shared past spanning 25 years. "I want you to comprehend what you discarded." "Silently," I said. "Not just me, but also your honesty, the regard you receive from your kids, and your reputation in the workplace." "Does this have to be done?" His lawyer cut in. "Our purpose is to negotiate terms." Continuing to ignore him, I said, "The terms are simple. You give the house all of your rights. You give up any claim to my commercial interests or inheritance. You consent to repay the credit card debt and the unlawful loan." Scott's cheeks flushed. "That's all. What should I survive on?" A last paper was passed across the table by me. "The deed to a modest business property on the Grand Rapids suburbs that I recently bought with some of my inheritance. I stated that your insurance agency is located in this building. For 5 years, the lease is paid for. Scott, it's your new beginning. Less than you anticipated, but more than you deserve." His eyes became wide as realization set him. "My building is now yours." "I have a lot of stuff now," I said coolly. "Put your signature on the documents." I saw employees erect the new corporate signs in the Hargrove Properties foyer 6 months after the Thanksgiving that killed my marriage. My name was now attached to the commercial real estate company that Uncle Edward had left me. A symbolic reclaiming of who I am. That January day, Scott had signed the divorce papers. As he agreed to the terms, his palms shook a little. Instead, his attempt to create a victorious departure from our marriage had left him feeling devalued and humbled. Jessica never came back. Our children had processed their father's betrayal in different ways, having rapidly evaluated the diminishing returns of a connection with a guy who was on the verge of financial collapse. Katie remained aloof, consenting to lunches on occasion but not talking about anything private. Following his initial outburst, David had developed a careful, constrained relationship with his father. Both had quietly taken delight in my handling of the matter. At a recent meal, Katie had said, "You didn't let him destroy you. He wanted to shatter you so he wouldn't have to feel bad, isn't that right?" Maybe she was correct. The casual brutality, the public declaration, their purpose had been to portray me as the abandoned spouse, a persona that would defend his behavior to our group of friends and, more significantly, to himself. Rather, I had come out stronger, richer, and more complete than ever. In my first 6 months of ownership, I added 3 buildings to Uncle Edward's property holdings, making good use of the accounting abilities I had developed over my career. In my building, Scott's insurance company remained open. A monthly electronic rent payment serves as our sole point of contact. Through common contacts, I had learned that he had made an unsuccessful try at online dating. When ladies of own age learned about his financial limitations, they were disinterested in his past interactions with younger women. My phone rang as the installation team completed hanging the sign, reminding me that I had a dinner with James Benedict to talk about the yearly scholarship grants from the Educational Foundation. This year, with an emphasis on women seeking business and financial education, I increased the number of winners. Grand Rapids had turned from winter drab to vivid green by springtime. At 51, I was beginning anew, not with resignation, but with curiosity, eagerness, and a hard-won understanding of the distinction between worth and value. Unwritten and wholly mine, the future loomed ahead.